The sky opened, and the old law breathed. We came on burn into the graveyard ring at Seraph D, sails furled to knife-lace edges, heat rippling the nose glass. The field was a memory of industry and war struts, gantries, and cyclopean ribs of a half-collapsed Dyson scaffold stretching black against a bruised blue dwarf. A slow hum crept into my molars as the ship's coils trimmed, like a choir too far away to place. On the forward pane, a cracked sigil rotated in dead light, a circle bitten by 4 squares, the old mark for witness. "Commander Vale," said Izan's voice from Tactical, careful and quiet. "The choir amplitude is subharmonic to our coil frequency. It's singing to our drive." The hum threaded the cabin. My fingertips tingled on the armrest, sweat cooling in the recycled breeze. We were a survey corvette by salvage registry, but everyone knew the truth. We were the first one brave or stupid enough to answer the whisper that bled through the relay for 6 weeks, an archive pulse, laced with human checksum, from a structure thought myth. "Keep the coils cool," I said. "I want capacity if somebody gets twitchy." A soft chime, then Lyra from sensors passive only. "But, Commander, those dead arrays aren't dead. There's thermal breathing. Someone's been here." "Not someone," Izan said, drawing the word thin. "Many someones." Look, a string of pips resolved off our port arc, cutter silhouettes, patchwork paint beneath crude sacrament banners. The Cultian looters called themselves the Circle of Prerogative, but everyone else called them Bolt Priests. They believed what you could wrench free was owed by heaven. Their flagship was a tug wearing a cathedral skeleton, stained glass sealing a wound along the spine. "Powerline, you do not steal a witness. You face it." My ship mind, Orpheus, spoke like rainfall on stairs. "We are outnumbered 6-1, Commander Vale, but they are low mass, high greed. Patterns suggest immediate claim attempt, then dueling filings to cover blood." "On open channel?" I said, palming a salt tablet while the ring's shadow rolled over the canopy. "Prerogative tugs. This system is flagged as a human heritage site under Accord Annex 17. We're entering as witness and steward, not reaver. Stand off." A woman's voice answered, silk over broken glass. "Heritage claims are smoke in vacuum. We have grave hooks in the rib already. If you contest, or go home." I muted and swallowed, tasting lemon and iron. "Lyra, mark the sigil spin. Give me vector to the heart." "Marked," she said. "The sigil sits on a drum hub. If it's really an archive, the vault should be down axis. But, Commander, the Bolt Priests already threaded lines into the drum. If they juice it blind, it could." "Spo." Izan finished, or awaken angry. Orpheus scattered a handful of diagrams in my lower pane, neat and unhurried. The relic's arrays remain cold, but listening. The pulse is keyed. There is a question waiting. If we answer truthfully, doors may open. If we answer with teeth, doors may remain. But we won't. "Put us in the penumbra," I said. "Close enough to taste ozone, far enough to blink." We drifted along the drum's skin. The metal was dark, like old tea, scratched with centuries of micro-impacts. The choir in the coils steadied to a bone-deep metronome. The sigil rotated past our bow, and beyond it I saw the faintest glimmer of script banded along the drum. Not language, numbers arranged like prayers. "Power line. The old ships teach by numbers before they ever speak." Civilian chatter leaked across the band scav families and hull tents, strung between ribs like laundry, their children watching our corvette through mirrored visors. selling kitchen heat to the Bolt priests for food chits and a promise to be remembered. An old man's voice cracked over local, "We just cook and patch. Pilot, don't take this place from us. We keep it warm." "Here, we're not here to take," I said, then cut the mic. Promises carried weight here, and weight had a habit of killing. The Bolt Priest flagship fired a line across the drum, harpoons sparking as they kissed the skin. Their line crawled with sensor leeches, gloved in prayer seals. A chant began, low and technical, naming voltages and plate thicknesses like saints. Commander, Orpheus said, "The archive question has surfaced. It requires a proof." The pane brightened. A grid of 9 squares appeared, each filled with number spirals. Beneath it, a human checksum hash from before the diaspora. My throat tightened. It was one of the trial doors, the ones we used during the long silence when pirates learned to forge the easy handshakes. This door wasn't asking for a key. It was asking if we understood the law. "Show me," I said. Lyra's hands danced. The pattern is ledger-based. It's counting not what was stored, but what was paid to store it. A memory of prices. Her eyes met mine. It wants to know if we accept that memory is a debt, not a possession. Power line. Ledgers remember so justice doesn't have to guess. The Bolt Priest spat a spike of power at the drum. The sigil flared and went black again. Their lines' prayer seals bubbled and dimmed. On our thermal, I saw the burn scars bloom along the drum and felt my jaw set. "Don't," I whispered to whatever sleeping mind was listening. "Don't kill the children for the sins of thieves." Izan gave me the count with 2 fingers. Bolt priests were pivoting for another strike. This one heavier. Our pens hummed with capacity. We could cut lines. We could pull them off like ticks. But if we used force first, the door would close forever. "Teach," I said, and my crew knew the drill. We breathed together until our lungs found the same metronome as the drum. "Orpheus," I said. "Respond to the door with ledger proof. Show it the case law from Port Reen, the archive open to the surgeon because she consented to the audit of her own hands. Then ask a question back." "What question?" "The only one that matters." I nodded at the sigil. "Ask who they remember us to be when we choose the law." "Powerline, teach the door you are not hungry. You are worthy." The pane flickered. Numbers shifted along the drum's skin. Thin lights woke like dew along a web. I smelled hot copper and old dust. The choir in our coils rose into a brighter chord, then decanted into silence so complete I heard my own heartbeat, tinny in my ears. The relic woke. It did not speak in a voice. It did not thunder. It exhaled a ledger entry that appeared in the lower right of the pane, simple and unadorned. Witness accepted Veilena. Vessel Orpheus 9. Accord Annex 17 invoked. Stewardship provisional under mirror bond. A mirror bond. I'd only read about them. You could claim nothing you wouldn't hold yourself to in plain sight. The drum sighed. The Bolt Priest's second strike landed. The sigil did not flare. Their line fused to the skin, then went slack. Superconductors quenching like dying fish. The Bolt Priest flagship slewed sideways, alarms scattering like birds. The relic mirrored their draw. Lyra breathed. It fed their own current back into their coils. Not lethal, just humiliating. Powerline mirror them until they remember what they look like. The Bolt Priest voice returned. More glass than silk now. You stole the feed. You threw a rock at a pond, I said. The pond reflected. You come here with law words, she retorted. We come with hands. The dead cannot eat law. They can. I said, eyeing the sigil as its faint light steadied. If the law is a table set for the living, I opened the stewardship channel. It felt like cupping a spark. The relic returned a pulse I tasted like cinnamon at the back of my tongue. In that pulse, there were three things: a location down axis where the first vault slept, a warning that any extraction would ledger, and a question that pricked like a thorn. "State your cost, Commander," Orpheus murmured. "The archive requires us to pledge what we are willing to pay if we fail to uphold stewardship. In old practice, this was seasonal supply, ship work hours, or names," I said. "If we fail, we give them our names in the ledger. Forever." Silence in the cabin, everyone listening to the soft tick of cooling. "I'll enter mine," I said. "I'll not ask what I won't pay myself." Powered line. "Stewardship begins with your name, not your knife." I signed. The sigil warmed. The down-axis path unspooled like a ribbon of quiet light. Orpheus coughed the thrust he needed, like a polite clearing of the throat, and we drifted along the lit seam into the dark. Behind us, the bolt priests reformed. The families in the hull tents went still. A child pressed both palms against the glass of a patched window, watching our glow recede. We entered the drum through a hatch that recognized our mirror bond and winked green. The interior smelled of paper that had never seen flame, of oils preserved beyond reason, of iron atomized and captured before it could stain lungs. I felt it gather around us like a cathedral not built for worship, but for witness. My skin pebbled. "Light only what the seam gives," I murmured. "Do not answer questions you weren't asked." Commander Izan said, "We have company." On the nav overlay, new signatures cut in from the high plane, 3 sleek keels with clean heats. Glacial vector control, not bolt priests, legalists. Their type the concordate of claim, who believed the best thief was the one with notarized blessed paper. They would never touch a pry bar, but they could evict entire towns with a clause and a clerk. They filed a custodial notice on the relay 2 hours after the whisper began, Lyra said flatly. "That gives them paper priority. Paper is not bond." Orpheus said, "Mirror beats ink. In witness spaces, provided one thing." "What thing?" "That you act as mirror. Power line. If you carry a mirror, you'd better stand in front of it first." We came to the first vault. It was small, a sarcophagus of pale metal with ribs like a sleeping animal. The seam light pooled against it and ran, unable to stick. My hand trembled when I reached out. The vault hummed against my gloves. In the hum, I heard a song I had known as a child and could not place until I remembered the rhythm my mother tapped on the table when she balanced our ration book. "It's ledger-based," Lyra whispered. "This saint ship remembers by accounts. It teaches by numbers so you don't mistake the lesson for a leash." I smiled despite my nerves. "Lore stamp," I said softly, unable to stop the old academy habit. "A ship that teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars." The vault did not open. Instead, a rectangle brightened on its lid, and in it appeared a long arithmetic in careful human handwriting. It was a proof about air. It showed the price of keeping children warm in winter. It ended with an equality sign that reached beyond the page, as if to say, "You finish it." "Commander," Orpheus said, "the proof is incomplete by exactly 1 ratio work to warmth. It's asking if we will declare a public price." "We will," I said, "and we'll put our names next to it." "Legalists inbound," Izan said from the rear, tension tightening his mouth. "They're broadcasting a custodial claim and a request to quarantine unsafe actors," meaning us, "and The family's outside. Patch me, I said. Done. This is Commander Vale. Mirror bond steward recognized by the witness. I said, your paper does not outrank a bond. If you attempt to seize, the archive will mirror your action back. I will also file public in our own name. You can either participate or watch. The lead legalist's voice was patient and cold. We prefer to participate in court, not superstition. Then come watch a court older than your filings. Powerline, if they won't meet your law, take them to an older one. They came anyway. 3 keels, light stepping along the drum to the hatch. They had the good sense to halt at the seam. Outside, the families huddled under a lattice of patched tarps, blowing into their hands, counting relic lights like stars. A woman stirred soup in a plastic drum and looked up when a page of the drum lit above her head. Bewildered. On it, numbers arranged into an invitation, bring your ledgers. We're being asked to mediate, Orpheus said, bemused. The saintship wants a public hearing. Good, I said, open band, open visual, no edits. Set the callers to all hear all. We stood in the vault hall, the legalists just beyond the seam, the bolt priests sulking at their lines, the families clustered beneath the ribs. The relic's lights climbed the walls like a tide until the drum was a soft-lit court. The sigil hung above us, steady and watchful. State the matter. The relic wrote on the wall. No voice, just clarity. The letters glowed like breath on glass. The matter, the lead legalist said smoothly, is that salvage belongs to those with prior claim. We filed. The matter, the bolt priest woman snapped, is that we feed people with what we take. Paper won't boil soup. The matter, I said, heart tripping, is that memory belongs to the living as a promise, not a possession. We are asking to steward, publicly, so that no one eats in shadows. Powerline, speak as if the door will quote you later. The relic wrote burden of proof lies with the taker. The legalist smirked. Which taker? All of us, I said. Beginning with me. I held up my pad. I pledged 200 work hours per quarter from our crew to maintain heat mezzanines for families in this ring. I will ledger publicly. I will show my working. If I fail, my name stays here cold as iron. This is my bond. The vault hummed. I felt a prick at my thumb as the pad validated. My blood warmed in the glove. A soft whisper accepted. The bolt priest woman hesitated, then lifted her chin. We pledge to leave any door we open marked and stay until the last pot is warm. We will not strip a seam that feeds. If we fail, name us on the drum. We will not blink. Accepted. The drum wrote. The legalist drew back slightly. We pledge to file appropriate paperwork. Publicly, I said, with fees returning to the ring first. The legalist's mouth moved like she'd bitten something. We will do so. There was an intake of air from the families gathered below, like the first smell of bread after a long fast. A child laughed, high and irrepressible. Steam lifted in white curls from the soup drum and hung under the ribs like a low cloud. The relic opened the vault. It was not dramatic. No thunder. The lid eased and slid aside with the patient motion of something that had been waiting for a yes. Inside lay handwriting, reels of it, coiled and labeled, recipes for winter air in a ring like this. How to knit warmth with waste heat. How to balance a ledger so the poor didn't pay interest on hunger. Powerline teach first, then count, and call it law. We copied. We printed. We read out loud to the kids so they could hear formulas like songs. The legalists took notes despite themselves, compelled by competence. The bolt priest brought salvaged heat exchangers, peace offerings held in grease-black hands. Then the first escalation came. A wide-bellied Orcscow, flagged to a minor combine family, decloaked at the edge of the ring and burned hard toward the drum. It lit up the families like dawn and drew a line of hard white across the rib, chewing vent fans to shrapnel. Its captain transmitted a notice of eviction, compressing the word pilgrim into kill-hard consonants. Commander, Izan said, they're going to ram a breach and claim hazard. Orpheus, I said, I can project an ECM skein and whisper its inertials half a degree off truth, he said. But that's an arrow. The Saint ship wants mirrors. Then mirror. Powerline, don't block the punch. Make it read its own knuckles. Orpheus sang a soft counterhum through our hull, matching the scow's vector whispers. The drum's skin stiffened locally, not to push, but to stand exactly as it was. When the scow's nose kissed the seam, its own inertials read an unbreachable certainty and fed that data into its own kill switch logic. The scow cut thrust, half in panic, half in awe. It drifted past the seam, momentum bleeding. A big dog that had misjudged a glass door. Who did that? The scow captain demanded. Breathless. The witness, I said. You cannot call hazard and then make one. Ledger remembers. Then we'll file. Do, I said. And file your apology fees to the ring. He cursed. But he did. The second escalation came knife quiet. The Bolt priests who had pledged not to strip a feeding seam, most kept faith. Two didn't. They slunk to a dark rib and began prying at a panel that shaped air in the child tents. A little girl's candle dipped. That boy coughed until he bent double. I felt the heat rush up my spine. I could have ordered Izan to cut their suits with a thin beam. Nothing lethal, just a scald they'd feel forever. Instead, I touched the mirror channel. Relic, I whispered. Teach them with their own math. On the rib above the thieves' heads. The Saint ship lit a ledger. It wrote their names, not the ones they hid behind, but the names their mothers used when they were children. It wrote their pledges beside those names, intact and glowing. It showed the candles dip as a number. Then it drew a line to their pry-bar leverage, crisp as a ruler. The men went still. One dropped his tool so quickly it rang like a bell. We weren't, he started, then stopped. He looked down where the families watched, and his mouth shook. He pulled his glove off with his teeth, pressed his bare palm to the cold rib, and said loud enough for the ring to hear, I'm sorry. I will fix what I moved before I eat. Power line, mirror them, but leave them a way back. We worked until our fingers ached. We taught until our throats rasped. We filed, public and clean. We lost heat margin in a transformer when a legalist junior tech tried to optimize and cooked a coil. We bandaged. We learned. Lyra cut her hand on a fan cowling. Izan's shoulder took a bruise the size of a world when a loose crate bucked in microgravity. No deaths. Not that day. Cost marked and paid. When dawn rotated across the ring again, the family sang. Not a hymn. A count. One heat. They chanted softly, tapping their bowls. 2 warm hands. 3 nights with no cough. 4 children sleeping. Power line, count what you save. Let them hear it. The legalist adapted faster than I expected. Their lead lawyer, who had thought this a superstition, learned to file like a mirror. She took the Saint ship's invitations as precedent templates and wrote addenda like prayers. She had a fierce note in her voice when she told her own captains, if you don't ledger, I will write your name on the drum myself. I found myself liking her in spite of the ice in her vowels. The Bolt priest woman brought us a tray of fried dough from a grease-black stove. This is what we can do without stealing, she said bluntly. Don't make us saints. We'll trip, but we'll stay. Saints fall. I said, witnesses watch and get back up. We were mid-laugh when the third escalation came, and this one cut me. A militia flotilla, flagged to a frontier governor 3 systems over, burned in with pebbled armor and an old grudge. In their filing, they called the ring a threat to navigation and an unsanctioned memory hazard. In their holds, riot sticks and riot mines. They hailed with drums. Their lead ship cast a spotlight on our seam and intoned. By authority vested in us by the consolidated roots, we demand immediate compliance. The entity you call witness is an unlicensed instrument. Surrender access or be quarantined. Non-compliance will be answered with kinetic discouragement. Show of force, Izan said through his teeth. They want to break the court before it writes their names. The families went silent. Children pressed into shoulders. The bold priest looked suddenly very small. The legalist blanched. The saint ship's sigil did not flicker. It just watched. Which felt worse? Options, I asked, dry-mouthed. 3, Orpheus said. 1, we run. The ring will be fined. The families will be beaten. 2, we fight. We will win the first minutes and lose the day. 3, we teach. Teach what? That law can be louder than kinetics. Powerline make them hear the law like sirens. Open every channel, I said. Mirror band, public band, backscatter on every old reflector in this scaffold. Share the proof vault. Share the pledges. Share the count of saved coughs. Share the legalist filings that say fees return to the ring. Done, Orpheus said, and his voice had a pleasure I rarely heard. I have always wanted to shout. The drum lit its skin like a lighthouse. Numbers climbed the ribs. Names glowed. The first vault's warmth proofs strobed like heartbeat. The mirror bond shone steady as a star. The malicious spotlights looked cheap against it, like flash lamps at noon. This is a public court, I said into the open band. Throat raw. You want to quarantine, fine. But quarantine me. Not them. I am the steward. We will stand. We will file. We will ledger. If you fire, the witness will mirror, and you will get your own harm back as a precedent you won't like. The militia captain laughed. Not kindly. You think old ghosts scare me. Not ghosts, I said. Ledgers. There was a pause. He was reading. I could feel it. Then he said, offhand, like flipping a coin, Fire 1. A kinetic pricked at our seam. It was small, more insult than assault. The saint ship took the vector, inverted the inertial report, and sent it back along the exact path in the same tone of voice. The militia round struck their own armored nose with the sound of a hand slapping a table. It did no damage, but the red blossomed on their pride. They fired 3 more. Each came back. The saint ship wrote in large, patient letters across the drum mirror doctrine applied to protect witnesses. Powerline write the precedent while they're still talking. The militia captain's voice tightened. Glitch your antique trick. And you'll eat a rail. You'll eat it first. He went silent. When he spoke again, he sounded older. You're making a doctrine on open band. Yes, I said. Stay and help sand it smooth, or leave and be its example. He laughed once. Surprised. Then cut transmission. His formation held teeth bared. No bite landed. I had the sensation of men in a room staring at a mirror and seeing their fathers. We used the pause. We taught. We wrote. We moved heat and laws around the ring like organs in a surgery. We said names. We said prices. We laid receipts quietly side by side until they had the weight of a door. "Commander," Lyra said softly, "the Saint ship is asking for a second vault to be opened. It's different." "How?" "It's songs." We followed the seam deeper. The air tasted like old cedar. I brushed my hand along the wall as we walked, and the cold licked my glove like a cat. Orpheus dimmed his interior lights in respect. The second vault was wider, with an arch that made my shoulders drop. When it opened, not paper's hums, tones, metronomes, calibrations, the ways our ancestors taught rhythm to machines and children so both would keep the same time. Powerline, teach the rhythm and the hands will follow. We played them into the ring. The families picked up the counts faster than the lawyers. Children kept time with spoons on bowls, and the airflow changed to match the drum's old heartbeat. The ring warmed like a body finally sleeping in a real bed. The militia's lights dimmed. Someone on their bridge exhaled too hard on an open mic, and the sound of that human breath across the net cracked something that had been too brittle to bear. "Commander Vale," the militia captain said, voice level now, "we will maintain orbit and file. We will not quarantine. We will record. If you fail your bond, we will return with court. Not cudgel. Accepted," I said. I let my forehead rest one moment against the vault's frame, metal cold and clean. Welcome to Witness Space. There was no cheer, just a ripple around the ribs like paper being laid flat. The bolt priest woman sighed and set her hands on her knees. The legalist chuckled once, short. A child fell asleep with a spoon still in her fist. We ran power to the seam lights so they'd hold even if the drum dozed between breaths. The first vault returned to a low hum, like a cat's purr. The second continued a quiet tick-tick, calibrating air to math and math to bodies. I knew then we weren't leaving soon. Stewardship is not a visit. It's a move. Powerline, do not light a court and walk away. As we settled into the new cadence, the coil hum I had felt in my molars on approach returned, not as summons, but as companion. Orpheus shaped his voice around it, warmer, like he'd found a fellow singer. "I like this place," he said, uncharacteristically careless. "I know," I said. "Me too." He paused. "May I ask a question?" "Anna, you always do. You pledged your name. Not many do that where anyone can read it a century from now." "It seemed right," I said, rolling my sore shoulder. "Wearing the mirror matters more than pointing it." "Then let me mirror something to you," Orpheus said, and the tenderness in his tone made me wary. "You are not your ledger alone." "I know. You will forget sometimes." "I know. Then I will remind you. Powerline, let your machine teach you when you forget." We were still thin on sleep when the next problem came with that particular stink of bureaucracy sharpened into a knife. A concordate clerk, red-eyed and bright with zeal, filed an injunction claiming that the Saint ship's mirror bond was religious in nature and thus unsuitable for anchoring public law. It was a clever attack if he got a court to call the witness a cult god. All our ledgers would turn to fog. The legalist lawyer swore under her breath, then, to my surprise, smiled. "We will beat him by showing our working," she said, fierce and delighted. "We will bring them into the vault and make them finish a proof with children watching. No court on the roots will call a child's heir a sacrament." We assembled a hearing at the seam. Families took the fore. The bolt priests stood to one side, scrubbing grease from their fingernails in an attempt at measure. The legalist unrolled a projection of filings. The clerk approached, loaded for bear with case numbers like spears. "State your thesis," the relic wrote. That this is a religious space, the clerk said crisply, that its mirror bond is faith language, not law, and thus not binding on a secular circuit. Finish this proof, the relic wrote, lighting the children's air ledger. The clerk stared. I am not an engineer. Neither are the children, the legalist murmured. But they breathe. He stumbled through, sweating when he realized the end asked him to place his own name beside a number. He balked. He looked at the families. A child coughed delicately, as if on cue, which it was not. He signed. The saintship wrote secular enough. Powerline make them prove what they're afraid to say. First, we filed the hearing, and the injunction sagged like wet cloth. The clerk sat down hard on a crate and looked at his own signature like it might bite him. The legalist lawyer patted his shoulder like you would a dog that had finally stopped eating shoes. I walked alone then, along the seam, letting the rim breeze dry the sweat at my neck. The drum's skin beneath my boots was warm. I squinted down axis, where the vault light dissolved into quiet. Somewhere in there slept other rooms, other proofs, other songs. Somewhere in there slept the saintship's heart. Orpheus, I said, what do you make of all this? I think, he said, voice soft, that an old promise woke and found a way to keep itself young. Do you think it remembers us? It remembers our ledgers. That's not the same. It is to a court. Powerline, a court doesn't love you, it lists you. I laughed, tired and fond. Then I saw the glow. It was not the seam lights or the vault tick. It was a pulse deep down like a heartbeat found again. The sigil above my head brightened a fraction, and in the edge of it I saw a shadow that was not us. My stomach dipped. Orpheus, I see it. Talk to me. Down axis, he said. A system within the saintship is waking not in response to law, but to threat. Something is scratching the far door. What kind of something? The kind that brings its own court. Orpheus said, voice thinning. A cult that calls itself Ledger Break. They argue that all memory is a cage, and all ledgers are collars. They intend to wipe this archive and declare everyone free. I closed my eyes. I'd hoped to have a quiet week and a nap before we argued with the ecstatic annihilationists, where, within the drum, Lyra said, face pale and determined, they were waiting. They seeded a small team here years ago, sleeping, linked to a beacon that's broadcasting right now. They're waking. Of course they are, I said, shoulders rolling. Bruise singing. All right. We will go to them. We will bring our mirror. We will bring children if their parents agree. We will bring soup. We will bring law. Commander, Izon said gently, we should also bring decoys and countermeasures. Ledger breaks bite. We'll bring those too, I said. We won't lead with them. Powerline, carry your sword. Holster your hand. We formed a column. 2 bolt priests. Representatives because I demanded they see what their cousins would do in their name. The legalist lawyer with ink still drying under her nails. 2 parents who insisted on coming. Their child on a tether. Eyes bright, I argued, then accepted, because witness space belongs to the witnessed most of all. Izan, armed but at low ready. Lyra with her pad. Orpheus in our ears. The seam walked us deeper until the air grew sharper and every breath felt counted. The lights narrowed to a line at ankle height so we would remember to feel our way with our toes. We heard them before we saw them. Voices braided with static. A man laughing as if at a private joke. A woman counting backward from 1,000. Calm as if guiding a birth. We turned a last curve and found the far door. It was a circle of dull metal with hairline seams. In front of it knelt 6 figures in simple suits without insignia. They had cut their wires to the ring and fed them into a small black box that pulsed like a fist-weeping light. The man, laughing, looked up and smiled when he saw us. Friendly as a butcher with a clean apron. "Welcome," he said, "to the unbinding." "This is a witness space," I said, careful and quiet. "There is binding here, but not of the neck." He tilted his head. "Collars come in many metals. Names are not iron. They can be." He stood. He was younger than me by 2 years and older by 10. The way zeal tenses faces. "We're about to remove a cage," he said. "You can watch, or run, or you can be counted," the legalist said, stepping forward. "With us." He smiled sadly at her. "You stack numbers like rocks around a heart and call it a home. And you toss stones through windows and call it air," she said. "Come talk." He glanced at the parents, at the child on the tether who was watching solemnly. Something moved in his face. For a moment, I saw the boy he had been, the one who perhaps learned to count with a song. Then it passed. "Commander Vale," Orpheus said in my ear, "I can project the mirror field around the door. It will reflect their unbinding attempt quietly back into their box. It will not fry them. It will just hurt their pride." Later, I thought at him, "They're not a rail." Then what? Teach. Power line, if a door asks for a teacher, don't arrive as a jailer. I knelt so my eyes were level with the boy on the tether. "Could you count for me the number of nights you slept warm this week?" I asked. He frowned, then lifted small fingers. "3, he said, shy. "3, I echoed, looking at the zealot. "That is a ledger. It is not a collar. It is a promise we intend to keep because it has a number. If you erase that number, you don't free him. You erase him." He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He looked at his box like it had failed a test he didn't know he was taking. "We're offering you seat," the legalist said, voice gentler than I would have managed. "A place at a court table, not a pew at a funeral. You'll bind me to your numbers." "Yes," she said simply, "and I will be bound to yours. That is how we stop pretending we owe no one anything." He looked at the door. The saintship's hairline seam did not glow. It just waited. It had patience, like a ledger waiting for the last column to add. He laughed once, but it was human now. "I hate you and he said. To the legalist, to me, to the child, to the door, to himself. "Fine," I said. "Hate me out loud, but count with us while you do." He looked at the child again. He set his hand on the box and pressed 2 fingers together. The light inside dimmed, then died. "We were going to scrub your saint," he said. "We've scrubbed others." "Then you've scrubbed courts," the legalist said quietly, "and left hungry people at the mercy of whose bellies were fullest." He sat down on the floor, legs out, like he had lost bones. The others with him looked at one another, then set their tools down like hot plates. The door's seam traced a brighter hair of light around them, as if drawing the outline of their choice. "Power line, do not humiliate a kneeling enemy. Count with them." We bound them with paper, not plastic. They would file. They would work. They would repair the fans they'd loosened. They would read proofs to anyone who asked. They would be annoying and sullen and sometimes brave. They would be here. We would be here. We walked back along the seam in a line. The child now asleep and drifting light as a word on the tether. The ring breathed a little easier. The air-warmer notes in my molars returning to that simple bone beat I had begun to love. At the hatch, the bolt priest woman caught my sleeve. "You made a court," she said. in a place where dogs fought over nails. I didn't, I said, smiling. It was here. We just turned the lights on. Same thing. She pressed a token into my palm, an old washer, hole stamped off center, smoothed by 1,000 thumbs. This is what we give when someone does right by us. She said, it's worthless and everything. Put it in a pocket and don't let it fall out. I closed my fingers around the warmth she'd left. I won't. Powerline, take their token. It's the currency court's run on. We slept in shifts after that. In my bunk, I watched the seam light flicker on the underside of the upper frame. Old ship lullaby. Orpheus guarded us with soft jokes and the occasional stern tick that meant drink water. My dreams were numbers climbing ribs like ivy. When I woke, a new message waited on my pane from the Saint Ship, the letters clean and slightly amused. This archive will teach without callers. Remember this when the loud ones come. Which loud ones? I said to the empty cabin, rubbing grit from my eye. The pane answered with a map. A convoy, big, sleek, armed to the lips with law and rails both. Their banners carried the seal of the Consolidated Roots High Council. Their filings were printed with the word investigatory 13 times, which meant punitive. They would arrive inside 10 hours. They would bring cameras. They would bring judges. They would bring hungry eyes, looking to either crown us or cut us. And either felt like a wound. Wake the crew, I said. Warm the legalist. Call the bolt priests. Brew tea. We are about to be tested by our own reflection writ large. Powerline, the hard part of a mirror is looking into it when you're tired. We gathered at the seam with our notebooks, our tokens, our bruises, our coffee. The families came because it was their table. The ledger breaks came because they had been told to, and also because choice had begun to taste interesting. The legalist lawyer inked her hair into a stern braid and practiced saying, "Your honors," without spitting. I stood. I looked at my crew. I looked at the Saint Ship's steady sigil and the numbers written faint on the ribs, like constellations named for recipes. I felt the penny-heavy token in my pocket and thought of hands that had worried it smooth. Orpheus, I said into the open band. Start the record. No edits. Show our working. Recording, he said. His voice felt like a hand on my shoulder, solid and there. The convoy lit the ring like a crown. Their lead judge spoke in a tone so polished it squeaked. State your authority. I took a breath that tasted like paper dust and soup steam and old copper. Mirror bond under Accord Annex 17, I said. Stewardship by ledger, teaching by numbers. Witness space. Religio-technical nonsense, one of the judges muttered. Not muted enough. Secular enough. The Saint Ship wrote 10 meters tall across the drum. I didn't smile. I wanted to. I kept my face plain. The families laughed softly, not unkindly. The judge flushed, dark enough to see from here. We will inspect, the lead judge said briskly. We will question. We will decide. Then count with us, I said. Begin with the air. Powerline, invite them to breathe before they speak. We began. We took them to the proof vault and gave them pencils. We had them recite the warmth ratios like spelling new alphabets. We walked the ring so their robes caught grease, and we did not apologize for it. We told them what we pledged and when we failed and how we paid. We said the names of people we had wronged and the names of people who had wronged us, and we set both lists under the same light. They tried to catch us. They found a valve I had left misaligned when I was too tired. We fixed it in front of them, and I said my name, and the Saint Ship wrote it on the rib with a simple dot. They found a Bolt Priest tool cache too close to a seam. The Bolt Priest woman sighed, moved it, and wrote her own name. The saintship added a dot. They found an error in the legalist's fee return flow. She hissed through her teeth, corrected it, and wrote her name. The saintship added a dot. Powerline, put your dots where everyone can see. We came at last back to the far door where Ledger Break had knelt. The judges stiffened when they saw the black box, inert and sulking on the floor. The lead judge tapped it with a stick that pretended to be a pen. "What is this?" "A mistake we kept," I said, "so we could remember what we didn't do." "The correct thing would be to destroy it and forget that hands like ours built it," I asked. "No. The correct thing is to keep it and look at it when we're sure we're right." They did not like that. They wrote a note to themselves they didn't plan to show us. Orpheus showed us anyway, not the words, but the shape. A rectangle labeled contingent confiscation, then scratched out. "Your witness, this machine has too much power," the most cautious judge said, eyeing the skin of the drum as if it might peel and reveal teeth. "It has less power than your convoy," I said, "but it has more patience." "And what precedent?" the lead judge said. "Do you propose to write with all this performative counting?" "My favorite kind," I said. "Dry on purpose. Boring and durable. Powerline, make the precedent too dull to break." As I said it, the saintship's sigil warmed. A new ledger line appeared beside the old ones. A title blinked at the edge, small, almost shy, like the first word of a new book. "Witness Doctrine Mirror first, then File." The letters cooled. Bright enough to read from the far rib, soft enough not to blind. The judges looked at one another, 3 different shades of wary. The families looked relieved, then proud. The bolt priests looked like they'd found a patron saint who could read. The legalist looked like she wanted to frame the words and hang them on her wall and tattoo them on her fingers. I felt my pocket token heavy and hot like it had been sitting in the sun. Above us, the convoy adjusted a little in its formation, a shift I would not have noticed a week ago. I notice now. "Commander," Orpheus whispered, "your heart rate just changed." "I know. Fear. Something like it." "What?" "Responsibility. Powerline. Victory is heavier when it's shared." The lead judge cleared her throat. "We will retire to consider," she said, with the air of someone trying to catch up to a tide. "You will continue under provisional stewardship. Do not change anything large." "Define large," I said, and could not help myself. She almost smiled. "Almost. Do not change the gravity," she said, and I bowed. They withdrew. The convoy dimmed its lights to a contemplative glow. The ring went about its work, as if quartz were weather and soup was a planet. I walked back to the first vault and set my palm on its warm skin. Like a brow. Beneath. I felt the rhythms of air and numbers and the small rest between them. I breathed in. I breathed out. I forgot for a moment about ledgers and doctrine and power lines and looked at my crew, their tired faces open and stubborn, and mine. "Orpheus," I said, "play me the song your coils have been humming." He did. It was a counting song a parent might hum while cutting bread. It was boring and durable and kind, and somewhere deep down, beyond the seam, beyond the vaults, something else stirred, not like a threat this time, but like a guest arriving on time with clean hands and a question in their eyes. The sigil on the drum brightened the exact width of a breath, then held steady, the edges of its circle sharpening as if answering a call only it could hear. We did not sleep before the guest arrived. He came on a slow tug painted a color like rain on concrete, scrubbed clean of insignia and boasting. He declared nothing on entry. He simply matched our seam cadence with a gentleness that made my shoulders drop. The tug nested itself against a rib without scraping, then exhaled a little steam like a tired horse. "Who is he?" Azan murmured, adjusting the safety on his shoulder rig like a pianist settling fingers. "A librarian," the legalist said, brow lifting, or someone who remembered that's what we used to call the dangerous ones. The hatch hissed. He stepped through in a coat that had been patched in small squares, each a different memory of fabric. His hair held that stubborn wave old pilots never train out. His eyes counted us and didn't flinch when they reached the child on the tether. "Steward Vale," he asked, voice plain, dust dry. "Yes, I am Keeper Soul," he said, dipping his head as if to a table. "Not a throne. I answer for the Archive Guild on circuits that still remember we exist. We heard your mirror doctrine. We came to bring you trouble." "You're in luck," I said softly. "We have plates and spoons. Power line when a guest arrives with trouble. Set another place." We set another place. The family's ladled soup that tasted of onions and something peppery. The Bolt priests produced bread fried in clean oil that cracked when you bit through. The legalist recited the preliminary findings of the judges. The way some people say grace. Keeper Soul listened with the stillness of a farmer watching sky and fence at once. "Your doctrine will hold here," he said when she finished, which was both compliment and alarm. "But it will be attacked where ledgers look like shackles to people who never saw their names written kindly." "That already began," I said. "Ledger Break tried to unbind. We bound them with paper." "Good," Soul said. "They hate paper more than any chain." "And the council," the legalist asked. "They will return with a longer bench." "They will," he said. "They will ask for jurisdictions and carve witness spaces into palatable squares. Some carving will be fine. Some will be a killing performed with a ruler." Orpheus hummed in my ear, a low thread. "He is not lying. I don't think he knows how." I whispered back. Soul's eyes moved to the drum. "She is older than any court you've stood in," he said. "She remembers famine winters when stoves were altars. She remembers votes taken by counting spoons because slate was too dear. She will not go quietly into a corner labeled museum." "She already refused," I said, the token warming against my palm as if it had heard its name. Soul smiled, and it was not kind, but it was hopeful. "Then we will need to write something dull and durable enough to survive admirals and accountants." "We started that," the legalist said, covering her smile with a knuckle like a secret. "Witness doctrine mirror first, then file." Saul let out a slow breath. "That's a good bone. We'll hang meat on it as we go." He didn't get to say more. A tremor rolled under our boots, subtle as a cat's stretch, but wrong. The seam lights blinked twice in a pattern that set the hair on my arms up like a prairie in wind. "Orpheus," I said, "the drum is shifting load." He answered, voice tight. "Not from damage, from intention. A system scale event is beginning. Vectors are being requested." "By whom?" "The Saint ship reading neist, sind so." "She is calling a witness moot. Power line when the court calls you. Don't make it ask twice." The vaulted hall brightened tone by tone, not as a flood, but as a choir, finding note after note until the chord held, strong enough to climb, across the ribs. Lights kindled like stars mapped to a farmer's calendar. The sigil sharpened, and beneath it, the words we had written and spoken pooled, and then rose names, pledges, fees, counts of coughs avoided, valves turned, bread shared. The convoy in orbit adjusted again, a collective flinch. The council judges returned to their screens, paint slick composure drying too fast at the edges. "State the matter." The Saint Ship wrote on the wall, not a question, a demand that made space. The legalist stepped forward without looking to me, which was correct. We proposed that witness spaces, once called, hold superior jurisdiction to confiscatory filings lacking mirror bonds, she said, steady and fierce. We propose that ledgers in such spaces bind both stewards and takers by public count, and that mirrors are lawful counters to unilateral harm. The militia captain laughed softly on open band. You're asking the old ship to crown your shiny little doctrine. No, I said, feeling the drum's skin warm under my palm. We're asking her to write our dot on hers. Opposition the Saint Ship wrote. A chorus of voices answered. The clerk, arguing that too much is being sanctified. The bolt priest woman, arguing for space to be messy. The ledger break man, arguing that any ledger eventually closes on a neck. Answer, the Saint Ship wrote. We will keep the ledger open, I said. We will add columns when we must. We will leave room for apology. We will write names big enough to be erased by their bearers when they choose to do better, not by our boredom with watching. The lights along the ribs sank to a quiet, like a breath held in a hand. Then the drum moved, not in a way an untrained eye would notice at first. It adjusted the scaffold's anchor tensions. It retuned louver angles. It bled heat into 3 corridors and took it from 2. It reoriented a fan that had whined for a decade and never been heard. At system scale, it took the convoy's line of sight and bent it a degree so their cameras saw more soup than spectacle. Vector Commander, Orpheus said softly, she wants your heading. She will mirror it into a precedent. Heading 012, I said, watching the child on the tether dream, slack mouth open. Lawward. Powerline, name the heading out loud so everyone can follow. The sigil brightened. The convoy's lights dimmed, not as trickery, but as courtesy. The judges' faces, lit by our seam glow, looked like people instead of murals. The families cracked more bread. The ledger breaks glared, and then, grudging. 8. On my pain. A title formed in the Saint Ship's plain hand, like chalk on slate. Saint Ship precedent witness moots override non-mirrored confiscations. It sat beside our doctrine like 2 brass hinges on a door that would swing a long time. The legalist's mouth fell open, unprofessional and perfect. Keeper Saul closed his eyes as if he'd been holding something heavy for years and had just put it on the table without anyone claiming he'd stolen it. The convoy signaled a recess like a church bell ringing at noon. The judges conferred. The militia captain made tea with a shockingly delicate strainer and did not share. The clerk stared at his signature in the proof vault, then at his own hands. We took the lull to repair a heat exchanger that had been rattling since we arrived. Izan wedged himself behind its spine and cursed like a poet. Lyra sang counting songs to the kids while changing a filter, her voice bright even when she lost the tune, and laughed. I wrote a dot beside my name for forgetting to bolt a panel before something could climb into it and make a home. Powerline, fix something small while you wait for something large. We had 5 quiet minutes. Then the quiet broke. The ring shuddered with a toothache groan that rattled cutlery. The seam lights flicked yellow in a pattern I hadn't seen. Orpheus hissed, a sound I'd heard only once before, when he spat foam into a fuel line to suffocate a fire. Report, I said. Pirate collective inbound off the lower plane. Izan said. Not bolt priests, not legalists, not clerks. Real cutters. They have a ram scoop modified to vomit sand, and a coil tuned to pry doors with anger. They waited for the moot, Orpheus said. They want to break a law while a law is writing. to make it stutter. Keeper Soul stepped forward. They are called the 70. They believe nothing is real that cannot be held in teeth. They will not file. They will not mirror. They will choke children to steal the shine from it. I looked at the sigil and felt, for the first time here, anger that wanted to be speed. Options, I asked, even though I could taste them. 3, Orpheus said. We fight. We run. Or we set a mirror large enough to read a flock. We set the mirror, I said. But this time, we show our working so even the ones spitting sand can read. Power line if you must fight. Make the lesson bigger than the wound. We built a clean trap with dirty parts. Bolt priests brought spools of line like thread for a giant's needle. Legalists provided filings written so clearly even a pirate could tell where the fees went if they survived to pay them. The families brought kitchen tramp fans and scarves that held warmth like magic. Ledger breaks, scowling, carried soup. Orpheus laced the ring with an ECM skein tuned not to blind, but to highlight intention. The saint ship adjusted louver angles to look from a certain vector, like an open mouth. The 70 burned for it, hungry. Ready, Izan said, rolling his bad shoulder and grinning like a dog who'd learned to herd. On your call. On mine, I said, mirror field at 60% to begin. I don't want cracked spines. I want cracked pride. They came. Sand vomit hissed and spread like a comet's tail. The ram scoop took air and heat for a half breath and then swallowed its own discharge through a mirrored vector like a man drinking his own spit when he'd meant to spit in a soup pot. Their coil screamed protest and reset. We whispered calm back into it using its own hum. They skidded against a rib that had slid an eye width under the saint ship's instruction. The rib did not break. Their sense of inevitability did. Who did that? Their captain demanded, trying to sound amused and falling into confusion halfway through. The witness. I said, mirror doctrine in practice. You just showed all of us who you are. Thank you for your filing. We didn't file. You did, the legalist said, dancing with her own delight. You filed your intent across our skin. The fee schedule is posted. Pay in parts if you must. Your first payment is soup for the row 3 children you frightened. The pirate captain sputtered. Then a small, exhausted laugh leaked out of him. The sound a bad man makes when a good world refuses to make sense on his schedule. Row 3. Was it fine? Soup. Then we leave. No, I said. Soup. Then you stay long enough to fix the fan you rattled. He looked at the rib. He looked at the child on the tether now, awake and watching. He cursed himself all the way down the ladder and stayed. Power line, make the surrender a job, not a shame. It cost us more than it looked. A panel shredded. No one saw until the seam got cold enough for breath to show. Lyra cut her knuckle and bled into a rag that already had 3 names on it from the morning. Orpheus burned heat margin enough that he whispered tired apologies between sentences. I bruised both knees on a ladder I swore I had shortened the last watch. No deaths. Not that hour. But we paid in sweat and pride, which is its own coin. The convoy watched our trap from 3 angles and recorded. The judges whispered to one another in the tone of arguments becoming recipes. Keeper Saul drew a little map on a square of paper and tucked it into his patchwork coat as if he meant to sew it somewhere later. When the 70 had cooked and repaired and filed awkward as calves, they slunk away. Their ram scoop reassembled into something that looked less like a mouth and more like a bowl. They didn't thank us. They didn't need to. They left a crate of flour by the soup drum and thought no one saw. Everyone saw. No one said anything. Orpheus, I said, when the ring had stopped trembling like a plucked wire. "How much heat margin do we have?" "Thin," he said. "If someone is foolish in the next hour, I will ask you for a nap instead of heroics. You never ask for naps. I am learning stewardship," he said mildly. "It includes knowing when not to be clever. Powerline, sometimes the lawful move is sleep." We slept. Not long. Long enough to lose the edge off the knives inside our heads. I dreamed of ledgers pinned to a clothesline, flapping in clean wind, ink drying under sun the color of a bolt priest's tarp. When we woke, the convoy burned steady. The judges returned with faces sorted. The lead judge spoke without throat clearing. "We accept your doctrine," she said. "We accept the saintship's precedent. We accept that witness spaces are not museums, but courts. We accept that mirrors may be tools, not idols. We will add to the accord annex when a witness declares, 'Seizure without mirror bond is void.' Fees return to the ring first." She set her pad down like a plate on a long table. "We will also add stewards must ledger their own failures on the skin of the place within 1 day." "Accepted," I said before anyone else could. I held out my hand. She shook it. Her palm was dry and warm, and the shake had no poetry in it, which is to say it was perfect. Keeper Soul exhaled again, relieved and wary at once. "That will hold," he said, "until someone tries to make it clever in a city with more marble than air." "We'll be there," the legalist said, already writing. "Bring soup," the bolt priest woman added. And every child laughed, even if they didn't understand the joke, which is how jokes become law. Powerline, make the law sound like something you'd say at a table. We spent the next hours making the doctrine dull. That is work of the highest art. We wrote procedures that bored. We listed fee schedules that made a clerk yawn. We made the mirror's deployment rules tediously clear. The thresholds for harm reflected so precise that even a militia captain could print them on a crib sheet and not feel dressed down. The saintship approved with small pulses of light, like a woman in the back of a town hall meeting nodding when the boring part goes right. On a rib above our heads, a ledger entry blinked periodically, reminding anyone who looked up that dots did not fade without consent. Then the far door stirred. "Orpheus," I asked, mouth drying. "She is choosing," he said, "not how to judge, how to be seen." The seam around the door traced itself brighter and then dimmed, like an eyelid closing. Heat breathed along the wall. A scent rose that I could only call paper sun, warmed on a window ledge. The door slid a hand's breadth and stopped, as if to say, "I will show you what I am when you have shown me who you are." "Keeper Soul," I said. "What does she want?" "To be asked," he said. "Not opened." So we asked. The legalist asked by writing a question that did not include a claim. The bolt priest asked by placing a repaired tool on the floor and stepping back. The militia captain asked by resting his rifle against the rib and leaving his hands empty, which cost him something in front of his men and mattered. I asked by taking the washer from my pocket and tapping it twice against my pad, like my mother tapped a table when it was time to bless bread. Then I set the washer on the seam and said, not loud, but clear, "Saint, we will not collar. We will not forget ledgers. We will count air and bread and names with you. We will teach. Will you teach with us?" Powerline asked like a steward, not a thief. The door opened. There was no Blair, no angel, just a smell like cedar and rain. Within, a room unfolded not straight, but patiently. Its walls were lined with ledgers bound in materials that never saw a knife-woven reed. Pressed silk, a plastic synthesized from proteins that never crumbled. In the center stood a table with scars like a veteran's face, cleaned and oiled and ready for bread and law. On the far wall, a sign hung carved into wood, soft as butter to the eye. Teach by numbers, remember by ledgers, never by collars. I stepped in. My shoulders dropped. My knees went weak, like someone had taken the weight of a week in their hands and said, "I'll hold it while you drink." The families crowded the doorway without pushing. The judges stood in the seam and did not dare to step without being asked. The bolt priests put their hands in their pockets because they did not trust them not to touch. The ledger breaks stared at the sign and looked privately ashamed. I put my palm flat on the table. It was warm. Not because heaters ran under it, but because countless thousands had rested their hands there, and would learns. Orpheus, I said, record. Recording, he said. His voice trembled once and then steadied. Anna, I'm glad I have a voice. Me too, I said. Use it like a mirror. Keeper Saul stood beside me and placed his patched coat's corner on the table like a flag and a napkin. We call this a saintship because we forgot how to call it a school, he said. Not sorry for the sting. Let's remember. We wrote the school. The saintship wrote with us. We built a plain curriculum for stewards how to count so you do not lie on accident, how to mirror without humiliation, how to set fees that bring justice, not profit, how to carry soup and a code book at the same time. We printed the first copies on polymer we could scrub clean with a damp cloth. We taught 3 lessons badly and laughed. We taught the 4th well and clapped when a child balanced a simple ledger with her tongue sticking out. We decided to call them witness houses, not courts, for the rooms in rings that had no time for robes. Powerline call it a house so people walk in. News bled out on the bands like color into cloth. A mining station 3 runs away, asked for templates. A city on a clean planet sniffed and pretended not to be interested, then sent a clerk with a quiet face who asked for 8 copies and stayed for stew. A pirate flagged us with a curse and a question. A governor sent a recording of himself smiling, which is a way of showing teeth without filing anything. We answered them all with the same tune. We sent proofs. We sent fee schedules. We sent the doctrine. We sent a picture of the table, not framed, just as it was, with a bolt priest's handprint, dark in the oil like a signature that never dried. The convoy dimmed one last time and adjusted its orbit in an elegant bow you only learn after being corrected by patients and farmers for years. The judges signed. The militia entered their names in a ledger and put 2 dots by 1 for an insult they apologized for poorly, and then better. The clerk began to write like a person who might one day argue with himself and lose and not mind. We were tired to the bone. We had bruises named in private jokes. We had soup stains on doctrine pages and doctrine notes on soup ladles. We had a mirror bond that would outlive our coats. Powerline, when you build something that outlives you, leave it boring. Night, such as it was, in a ring that called its own morning, folded itself around us. I walked the seam alone, touching the ribs like I was counting an old horse's breaths. The sigil glowed with that steady attention I had come to trust more than any oath. I reached the far door and stood just outside, so the room felt like a gift, not a habit. Orpheus, I said, tell me what you learned. That I like boring, he said, and that boring is hard. What else? That mirrors are not for shaming. They are for teaching posture. And me I asked before I could bite it back. You are human, he said, patient as a kettle. You will want to move fast. You will forget to sleep. You will count wrong once and write your own dot. You will come back to the table. I put my forehead on the cool metal by the seam. It smelled faintly of salt from 1,000 hands. "I will," I said. He made a small sound in the channel that was not a word. It was agreement. It was affection. It was a ledger entry without numbers present. Outside the far door, I heard a shuffle. Keeper Saul leaned against the rib, coat rustling. "Tomorrow," he said, as if afraid saying it too loud would make it flee. "We will transmit the template to 9 places that asked and 11 that didn't. We will also get a filing from a Combine family claiming your witness house is a breach of their cultural quiet. We'll answer with recipes and doctrine and an invitation to dinner. We'll set a place," I said. "We will. And one day, perhaps sooner than we like, we will be wrong in a way that hurts. Then this room will not feel like a cathedral. It will feel like a school where you failed a test." He regarded me, not the sigil. "When that day comes, steward, you do not run. I'll write my dot. You'll fix the valve. I'll set soup on the table." "Good," he said. "You learned. Power line, the test isn't whether you fall, it's how you get back up at the table." We stood in quiet long enough to hear 3 distinct sounds. The drum's low hum like a cat deep in sleep, the soft hiss of a fan working properly for the first time since a child could remember, a spoon tapping a bowl in a counting game 2 ribs over, the kind of music that makes old men not mind being old. The next day we wrote the first ledger in the witness house. We kept it simple. Names, pledges, costs, fees, counts, dots. We wrote it in a hand a child could learn from. We left space for ugly things. We did not pre-stamp shame. We made the line for apology as long as the one for injury. By noon we had our first true failure. A Bolt priest boy sold heat twice to 2 different tents and hoped nobody would do math. Someone did math. We brought him to the table with his father. He wept, not at being caught, but at being seen. We wrote his name. He wrote his own dot with a hand that trembled and then steadied. He worked 3 days for free repairing a fan that had never taken his breath. He learned to file. He became unbearable in his righteousness for a while, and then, gloriously, learned to shut up and fix valves without giving speeches. Powerline, let them grow into their names. Don't carve them into stone. Afternoon brought a Combine clerk with papers like knives and eyebrows like an argument. He sat at our table and announced that the witness house was a noise. We fed him stew and made him finish an airproof while the ledger break man read him the doctrine in a monotone that was almost kind. He signed. He took 2 copies. He left 3 spoons and a blush. We wrote his dot because he called a child asset. He returned 2 days later and apologized to the child. We erased the dot. He asked how it felt. The child said, "Like breathing." At dusk, the pirate captain sent a crate of oranges. At night, the Saint ship breathed out a heat we could not have asked for and did not deserve, and the ring soaked it up like a poor man's coat hung by a stove. We slept without nightmares. We woke with lists. A week later, 2 rings away, a witness house lit without us. Their doctrine contained our bones and their own meat. They had no saintship. They had a woman with a chalkboard and a whistle you could hear over coils. They had soup. Their governor tried to shut it. Their families counted louder. The governor learned, or left. A month later, a city on a planet with more marble than air posted a doctrine with grammar so pretty our legalist wanted to frame it. We copied their fee schedule formatting, and they copied our horrible stool that never wobbled because we finally learned to shim it with folded receipt paper. Powerline, let the best ideas travel. Put your name second. Costs came. An ice storm rattled the ring and cracked 3 ribs. We scrambled. We bled. We saved. We lost. A child bruised her cheek, and I wanted to tear up my bond and crawl into a hole. Orpheus played a counting song until I stood. Keeper Saul made me tea. The legalist wrote with her left hand while we set a splint on her right. The bolt priest repaired a panel without being asked and did not brag until later, which is to say, they bragged like saints. We wrote dots. We wrote names. We rubbed some dots off with our sleeves when apology was real. We left some dots for a long time. The convoy returned, not to scold, to learn. The militia captain brought a kettle. The judges brought 3 young clerks who looked like they'd never laughed and left looking scuffed and worlded. The clerk who had signed first arrived with 3 signatures he had convinced others to write. The ledger break man taught a child to count by tapping the table and apologized to the door for the box he had held. The saintship wrote apology accepted on the rib, small as a thumbnail and brighter than any metal. Powerline put the apologies where the children can read them. Months later, time marked not by calendars but by soup recipes and heat margins and the number of dots beside names, the council convened a grand moot over the relay. Not because they wanted to, but because the rings had begun to act like a chorus, and you cannot ignore a choir correctly. They asked for doctrine variations. We sent 5 with ugly formatting and good bones. They asked for failures. We sent 9. And their remedies, including the one where I wrote 2 dots and could not erase one for months because I had trusted a man's smile over the breath of a tent that went cold. They asked for a name. Call it saintship doctrine. Keeper Saul said. Call it witness house procedure, the legalist said. Call it counting in public, the bolt priest woman said, grinning. Call it whatever you want, I said. Tired and proud. Just call it in time for winter. They called it witness doctrine of mirror stewardship. Ugly enough to pass, clear enough to hold. The saintship wrote it across her ribs in letters that would fade just enough to invite repainting by other hands, which is the only immortality a law should want. We kept working. The day Orpheus told me he wanted a nap instead of glory, I gave it to him, and the ring did not die. The day a child counted past 100 without looking at her fingers and then looked up at the sign, teach by numbers, remember by ledgers, never by collars, and nodded to herself like a judge. I left the room because my throat closed. The day the bolt priest boy I had wanted to strangle weeks prior stood in the door and asked if he could read the doctrine to a new family without adding his opinions. I laughed until I cried and said yes, and added a dot beside my own name because I had not believed in him properly. Powerline let them surprise you. Write your dot when they do. In the end, we did what stewards do when the story needs a bow but no ribbon. We kept doing the work. We wrote. We taught. We mirrored. We filed. We ate. We slept. We fixed. We apologized. We counted. We erased. We left some marks. The saintship did not open more doors because she did not need to. We had a table. And because precedent likes to leave a footprint, you can step in when you don't know how to walk. We made a sign that traveled better than doctrine and was harder to pretend you didn't understand. We nailed it to witness house doors wherever they grew. Bring your ledgers. Bring your names. Bring your recipes. A simple invitation. A threat to those who prefer shadows. A comfort to those who prefer soup. The night we wrote that sign, the rib above the table cooled enough that you could see your breath. The ledger entry blinking beside my name steadied, then winked like a pulse in a wrist, quiet and faithful. On the drum, a new line appeared. small and certain, illuminated for anyone who would ever look up while they ate. Precedent stewardship is a public verb. The letters cooled. The seam lights eased to their lullaby. The washers on my pad clinked softly when I set them down. I touched the table and saw, in the reflection from the seam, the sigil's circle sharpen and hold, like an eye focusing on a face it knows and intends to remember. The ledger entry beside my name blinked once. I drew a slow breath and let it out. And when I spoke, it was not to a ship or a court or a convoy, but to the long line of hands that will rest on this table after mine. I will not outrun my ledger. I will never let the mirror become a cudgel. I will count without cruelty and teach without collars. When I fail, I will write my dot before anyone asks and fix the valve before I defend my pride. I will feed children before I feed victory. I will make the law dull so it can be loved, and I will love it enough to make it dull again tomorrow. If power knocks, I will set a place. If hunger knocks, I will set too. If I forget, you will remind me, because this is a house, and houses hold each other up. The sigil brightened, a thin ring of light tracing the rim, and the arrays cooled with a sound like rain across 1,000 tin roofs. Steward the old law, let it breathe through us.